Hey, welcome everybody to our youth panel conversation circle. We're so excited to have all of our wonderful global youth fellows here with us. They're coming from all over, so they'll get a chance to talk a little bit more about what they do, their work that they're doing at the grassroots level, and what they've been doing here at the forum, advocating. So yeah, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Yay. Welcome to everyone online. Welcome to our fellows. We're so excited for all of you to get to meet these amazing young people. Just to briefly, we're moderating this conversation circle. It is the first of many. Most of the conversation circles will be next week, so keep an eye out for that. But we're very privileged to get to kick off this kind of tradition of NGO CSW New York during the forum. My name is Annabelle Gregg. I'm one of the co-program coordinators, and I also run a water insecurity youth nonprofit. So youth engagement is something that I'm very excited to get to continue in my role as a program coordinator here. And I will let my co-program coordinator introduce herself as well.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Rachel Guerrero. I'm a program coordinator with Annabelle here at NGO CSW, and I'm also a student completing my master's degree. One more semester.
Yay.
Great. So we kind of already introduced the conversation circle. We can talk a little bit more.
Let's have our fellows introduce themselves. We'll go in a circle in conversation circle fashion. Felix, do you want to start, and we'll
Yes,
go around
sure.
here?
Hi everyone.
Hi everyone. I'm Koku Hilux. I'm from. Hi everyone. Sorry for that.
No.
Oh, I think actually, will you turn that off? If I think they can all hear
Can
us.
everyone hear us?
As long as everyone can hear us, we'll.
If we speak, can you hear us? Our wonderful chat. We're getting a thumbs up. Thumbs
Okay,
up.
awesome. We'll stick with that.
perfect.
So you can just
Okay.
talk and they can hear us. Thank you, everyone.
Hello once more to everyone. I'm Koku Hilux. I'm from Cameroon. I work with Mifali, an adolescent-led movement coach and mentored by Women for a Change. We work around advocacy, adolescent sexual reproductive health rights, as well as different gender-related issues affecting young people in our country, and especially around sexual reproductive right education. So I'm happy to be here today and share with you. Thank you. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Amanda Rojo Cabezas. I am from Costa Rica, and I am the program manager of Nosotras Women Connecting. We're an organization working in all Latin America to strengthen leadership skills of little girls, teenagers, and women.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're joining. My name is Lila Mansour. I live in Canada, located in Canada, Syrian Canadian background. I work a lot in the access to justice and legal field. I'm about a year away from becoming a lawyer, so exciting for me. But I do a lot of work with immigrant communities, particularly Arab immigrant communities, on access to justice, translation of legal information, and helping newcomers navigate difficult legal systems.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Cécile Roth. I'm French, and I live in Spain, and I work as partnerships and policy officer in an organization that's called United Cities and Local Governments. And so it's an association of cities and regions from all around the world. And I work mainly on partnerships and global advocacy towards the UN, towards the international community, to represent local and regional governments. And I focus a lot on everything related to inequalities or equality. So including health, including youth related issues or initiatives, climate, everything in this sense. And I'm very happy to be here with you.
Hi everyone, my name is Aditi Pariyar. I work as a program officer for a small feminist fund, a New York-based fund called Women First International Fund. I live both in New Delhi and in New York. So Women First funds small grassroots women-led groups in South Asia and East and Western Africa that primarily work on economic justice. So groups that pretty much put money in the hands of young women, teenage mothers, widows, women at the margins of society, women that don't otherwise have access to national, international measures of funding. We help them through a 6-year grant-making model. We help them get back on their feet. We help them with employability skills, life skills, menstrual health and wellness education. I also work as a strategic advisor with a UK-based SRHR fund called Amplify Change that primarily works in Francophone Africa, Southeast Asia, and also the MENA region. That again works on many of the areas that my fellow fellows work on, like health, menstrual wellness, comprehensive sexuality, education, abortion rights, racial justice, carceral justice. So yeah, very excited to be here, a room full of really talented, accomplished people.
So what an awesome group we have here.
Yes.
So they are all part of our inaugural cohort of our Global Youth Fellows program. They're all chosen for their dedication to gender equality, their immense experience given their young age, and they're all just really awesome people, and we're so excited to have them here. They all came from, as you heard, all over the world to be at this the forum and be a part of the CSW process. So Rachel, do you want to get us started with our conversation circle?
We're going to do this kind of conversationally. So we're going to go around the circle to answer the question, and then you can comment on each other's answers if you want to, if you hear something that you feel inspired to engage with. And then we'll also be taking questions from everybody here online as well at the end. So yeah, if you have any questions or comments for the fellows, we'll have time for that at the end. So yeah, the first question we wanted to ask you guys is, what have your experiences been like so far at the forum? Not all of you have been here all week, so if you haven't been here during the week, you can say what you hope to do while you're here. But we just want to hear so far, just first time experiences, whatever. So yeah, Felix?
Yeah, sure. So it's been an amazing journey since the first day of the CSW. It's first of all my first CSW physically, and the experience is quite different because we used to organize watch parties. It's our signature event during the CSW, where we convene with over hundreds of young people from different parts of our country. We watch the CSW from our computer. We project it on the screen. We select a series of vast events that interest us and where we want to engage. That was our way of attending the CSW, conveying with our friends. And this week it has been a different experience, full with a lot of passion, because meeting different young people passionate about gender equality and the work that they are doing in their community has been amazing. I attended one session yesterday. It was really amazing. Boys Don't Cry. It was so good because it teaches us the value of men engaging in fighting for women's rights. It pushes us to the concept of he for she, and the experience has been so good so far. I'm excited about the upcoming sessions. Thank you.
Well, I have been almost all week, and to be honest, it has been amazing. Yesterday, I had opportunity to go to the 7th session plenary with all the government representatives. And it was very impactful to understand and listen to every single person talking about what they're doing in their own countries and how they're impacting the populations they have. For example, the Caribbean is doing a huge effort to talk about and work around menstrual justice. So that it's something that's super vital right now. And doing like this thing and coming to United Nations, so positioning that in the agenda, I think is vital for us to understand how we need to fight and how we need to start creating more strategies. But also it teaches a lot about resilience. Yesterday, there was the member state of Palestine talking about what's happening. And I think it was very impactful to listen to her and still to know how can we do more, you know? So things like that is what happens at CSW. And I think it like teaches us how we're vulnerable, but how also our actions can be so impactful in everything we do.
Yeah, I've been in absolute awe of the week, and I think now that I go back home, I'm going to be telling everyone, like, if you get the chance to come to CSW at some point, like, please go. It's such like a wonderful, inspiring, motivating space to be in, and to see the diversity, I think, of the people, I think is like I knew that I was going to meet people from all over the world, but to actually be there and hear the different perspectives is like, whoa, it's pretty crazy. And I think being from the global north and then hearing perspectives of individuals who are, you know, facing issues in the global south, while there are some differences, you see a lot of like commonality in the kind of global systemic issues that are causing problems both in the global north and global south. It's like those same sources. And you realize like there's so much that we can do to partner together, to work together. And as you mentioned, like for example, seeing members from, you know, from Gaza and participants speaking about their experiences and just all over the world, it's just, we have to come together, and I feel just so inspired this week.
Thank you. For me, it's a little bit different because I arrived yesterday. So
You can tell us about your plans.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
What
I
you're
will
looking
like
forward
change
to.
that. No, but still, I do like, and it's also my first CSW really. So it's like discovering the whole process and like everything, how it works inside the UN, what is happening outside. I think this is something that is very interesting to my eyes, to see how then it starts to connect or it doesn't. You said about the diversity of the persons attending and like organizations, countries, etc. I do think that, I mean, obviously many people might be used to that, but still I do think that we feel it. And I say this working with like my organization, we work with people and mayors and governors from all around the world. So we're like sort of used to diversity, like in the broadest sense. And still it's very impressive to see it here. And I guess like it's one of the main added values that an event like this has. Yeah, so that would be like my first impressions. And I just wanted to say that we met this new woman that she was like participating in every CSW since like 95 or something like this.
Yeah.
And this was also like amazing to just to discuss the history of the process, the history of the engagement of NGOs, of other stakeholders. On my side, it would be local and regional. I am really keen to know more about how this works, so that we can contribute to it in like varied ways. Yeah, so that would be my sense. And then I will be part of events with local and regional governments and see how we can connect with different stakeholders, so be it NGOs, be it the private sector, the UN agencies, etc. We'll see how it goes.
Great. I feel like we've already covered a lot of ground. So I'll try to say something different. I think because I work with a donor, I've had the unique opportunity to also be in donor circles and events that are outside of the UN headquarters. So it's my first time in person at the CSW as well. And to be in the UN building, looking at people that have come there for tours, young people that are experiencing the United Nations for the first time, it was very inspiring. It was really, I was personally really excited to be there. I felt like I was on a school tour as well. But yeah, I think I've had the unique opportunity to look at feminist conversations that are happening, outside of the main sort of the city UN and the UN headquarters. And to look at women's groups that are assisting women that kind of fall through the cracks. So, I've had the opportunity to attend a session by the Red Umbrella Network that works on sex workers' rights, domestic workers' unions, garment workers' unions. These are usually groups that some of the biggest feminist funds that I've also worked with don't necessarily fund. But for them to even have a platform at the UN CSW, I think is a huge step to get that kind of recognition, for them to just be here, to meet donors, to meet fellow feminists, and just, to claim that space as their own, I think is fantastic. I had the opportunity to attend the Equality Fund's Feminist Crisis Response Day yesterday, happening at the Scandinavia House. So, again, outside of the UN, but still very much a part of the CSW. So I feel like that kind of congruence is important, where you can align yourself with the main mission, but also to share our lived experiences, to humanize these people who are very much as much women as we are, leading the same lives as us, but may not be entitled to the same rights as us. And yeah, there was this panel where there was somebody from a feminist fund in Turkey, and she was talking about how there's a region of Turkey where a lot of people that were affected by the devastating earthquake were Syrians, and a lot of them couldn't access aid because they don't speak the language. I'm just getting goosebumps thinking about it. And she's talking about how there are so many smaller issues that we don't even know of, and she's talking about how a lot of groups from in and around Turkey kind of supported them, not with money, but just volunteering. And she's talking about how, you feel the love in the room. Like, a lot of people can't contribute money, but the fact that you can give your time, that you can be there, you can support people, and just to let them know that you are not alone in this. Because sometimes in the global south, it can feel like nobody cares. People are not a part of your experiences. So, and then we also had people from, Ukraine talking about the ongoing war, and the support that they get from Poland and all of their neighbors, and how crisis kind of sometimes takes you away from your main mission, which is to support women and girls, but you can't really do that in the middle of a humanitarian crisis. I also had the opportunity to attend a session by the Noor Feminist Collective, and they were talking about amplifying Palestinian girls' voices, which was fantastic. It was just to be in the same room as people experiencing the biggest humanitarian crisis, according to me, happening right now. It was just a gift to just be there. So yeah, it's been the sessions are so diverse, which I think is to be engaging, to have the opportunity to talk with these people that I may not have met at all in my everyday life, in my professional life, has been great. Yeah.
That sounds awesome. Thank you so much. I have like 80 million
I
followers.
know.
I guess not to like put back on you, but I do want to bring up the priority theme a little bit because you were talking about financing, and that's a big. I'll read the whole run-on sentence that is this year's priority theme, and maybe you can talk a little bit about it. So, for CSW68, it's accelerating the achievement of gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls by addressing poverty and strengthening institutions and financing with a gender perspective. Again, there's so many clauses in there, and then there's a lot of different aspects to like what kind of the goal of the outcome document is for CSW68. But in your experiencing with financing, and then we'll do a reverse circle. Thoughts on the priority theme, like what, especially based on your experiences so far, how do you think we can achieve those multiple aspects of gender equality?
Yeah, I definitely think it's a mouthful, right? the theme, what they're trying to address. I think a very simple way to kind of address this is we don't lead single issue lives. So there's no way to sort of approach one issue or one group of people if all of us aren't working on acknowledging that it's so different contextually, it's so subjective, from people's lives are so different just from the countries that we represent in this room. So I think it's really important to acknowledge the cross-cutting themes, the intersectional issues that impact women in different regions, from different religious backgrounds, from different circumstances. One of my colleagues at Amplify Change, she works on providing reproductive healthcare to a very small island off of Pakistan. It's called Baba Island, and they completely abandoned in terms of like healthcare from the government. In Lahore, Islamabad, they get no support at all. So they take like a 2-hour ferry twice a week to provide prenatal care, to provide like nutritional information to young children. And I was just speaking to her yesterday because she was participating in this forum, and she was talking about how, how do we talk about economic change when there are, women they don't have smartphones, there's no digital penetration, so they don't have access to the CSW session, but these women should have a say at a forum like this so that somebody works on their problems. So I feel like to have buy-in from those parts of those marginalized sort of sections of society, we need to increase digital penetration. There has to be, financing has to be demystified, right? Because even for me, I mean, I've been working in this space for a couple of years, and there were a lot of exchanges, a lot of information that would just go over my head because I have no idea what people are talking about. I was at this finance conference last year to raise money for some of the social enterprises that we support, and I couldn't understand the language. So I feel like that's a huge challenge as well, to demystify the world of finance so that women understand what they're getting into so they can ask for money that's rightfully theirs. I think it's a long road, but also I think we're taking all the right steps to be there. Like, microfinance is becoming easier and easier for women to access. There are unofficial banking measures. I can speak for India. We're beginning to employ women that have not had access to education beyond, say, the first 10 years of their life. So what we call the 10th boards, the 10th sort of grade. So that's higher secondary education. But just enough, they have just enough a grasp on language to understand like telebanking. So we teach them how to use ATM cards, we teach them how to open a bank account. Yeah. And that itself is so huge when you look at, parts of India that don't have electricity, they don't have running water. So, to have them have their own ATM, their own bank account for the first time, because it's usually men that have bank accounts that control the money in the entire household. That means the women have a say in how they spend their own money, and we work with female farmers as well that primarily do all of the farm work, but don't control any of the income from the land, that don't own the land, though. The land is owned by their husbands or their father-in-laws. So to kind of get them to have a small say in the money that they're bringing into their household can be like a huge step in then having them access formal and informal banking systems. Sorry, I hope I don't know how to use the conversation entirely and start talking about something else, but yeah, I feel like maybe those are some small steps that we can take from, at least in South Asia.
Yeah, amazing. Microfinancing and demystifying financing in general sounds like a good solution to that. Do you want me to read? I'm just going to read it to each of you because it's the longest back. Accelerating achievement of gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls by addressing poverty, strengthening institutions, and financing with a gender perspective. Cecile, thoughts on that? Again, first day here, so no pressure.
No, but I mean, we've been working on this theme for long, so it's from the perspective of cities and regions, this is one thing that, like, compared to other years, for instance, that really speaks to us, in the sense that it goes into sort of a advocacy strategy that we have to explain the role of cities and regions for equality. And so poverty is a very good entry point into that, in the sense that we really want to show how local public services are essential levers for equality. So to reduce inequalities, to reduce poverty, and then to achieve equality. And with equality, I mean obviously gender equality, but also equality in a very like multi-dimensional way, intersectional way. And so this year we have lots of we really have our eyes on this theme because because of poverty, and the way we sort of strategize around it is that we explain that to reduce poverty, we have to redistribute care, the care work, as one of many ways to reduce poverty. And one way to redistribute care is to also make public institutions have a clear role in that. And so it is, for instance, a role that local and regional governments really have. They have it, and they are like taking the responsibility for it, but not always with the finances that goes with it. But when they have public services for education, for health, for taking care of the public space, etc., etc. This contributes to equality. This contributes to reducing inequalities and ultimately to reducing poverty. So this is really something that is like a high priority for the what we call the constituency of local and regional governments as like an organized group. And then there is also the part on strong institutions, so
Yeah.
which obviously speaks
Of
directly
course,
to
yeah.
us, with the idea that I mean, it's normal that the UN focus on member states because it's like the point of it. But then what is missing is the articulation and like the governance with different stakeholders, and this means the governance with like civil society, for instance, but also in terms of levels of and spheres of government. So also taking into account the role of local and regional governments. And this is something that a parenthesis on that. Which is not a parenthesis because we're like here to talk about youth, but strong institutions is very important to reinforce the trust in these institutions on the side of young people and children. So it is also something that really matters this year for local and regional governments. And then just to end on that, I do think it's also interesting. I won't come back to finance, but I do think that there is something interesting in the way this thing and this CSW can connect to other international events, is that it's been like the poverty, has been the priority theme of like the COSOC Partnerships Forum in January. So we were there already to talk about poverty and how we need to work from a very like whole of society and whole of governance approach. And so now it's CSW, and then there will be the high-level political forum in July with the review of SDG 1, but also SDG 2 on hunger, which is related to poverty. So it's interesting to see how this can connect, and I hope this year with those milestones can also like really make something change and sort of like accelerating action on those topics. Yeah. I mean, that's the hope in here.
Yeah. So insightful. I know Rachel and I had the privilege of going to one of the civil society briefings yesterday. And one of, I forget her exact title, but was like a special rapporteur for the Secretary General. And the strengthening institutions is a big part of the Summit for the Future in September. And I remember she said that like, obviously there's a lot of things coming together for the Summit of the Future, a lot of goals, but she said the summary of like, really making sure that it's successful, if she had to pick one word, it's trust, and making sure that like these member states and like regional governments, like enhancing trust is like a really important part of strengthening institutions. So that's funny that you and the Secretary General agree.
I think her exact words were, "Why should they trust us?" Yeah, you know,
especially the youth. I think she said specifically,
the
like,
youth
don't trust us, and
why should they? Basically, so that was a big focus for Summit of the Future, with the conversation around reforming global governance and rethinking global governance. So.
And they have something specific for youth, like the UN Secretary General has like a program, like he published a policy brief on youth and future generations. And I think it's something that we really should like have our eyes on. And the same for, I forgot, but like the social summit, not this year, but the next year, with all the social like issues, then poverty will be there, trust will be there, youth will be there, etc. And I do think that the title is long, but then maybe it misses something else, and it's like participation, and this should be like really the sort of transversal priority there.
Absolutely. Lila.
Thank you. I love the contributions that you two have added, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say. But I think there's probably like three big takeaways that I had. And the first one being, yesterday I had the pleasure of attending a UNICEF event yesterday evening. And there's one thing that has really stuck with me. One of the panelists at the event said that they found, with kind of a survey of various studies, that giving women money, I think it was in the form of kind of like a limited aid, they found that contrary to common belief that it may increase gender-based violence towards the woman, for example, perhaps the male figure in the household wants to assert dominance because the woman has money, they found the opposite, that actually empowering women, giving them some economic independence and increasing cash flow specifically to the female in the household actually reduce gender-based violence towards the woman. And I was like, wow, I think, you know, we need to discuss this, and that woman empowerment benefits everyone, and they actually found benefits to the entire household. So I just take that away saying, you know, we need to do more, and that this is gonna be beneficial to everyone. You know, when we're talking about household level, this is beneficial, then community, then, you know, nationally and internationally. So I was very excited to hear that. I think and very interesting other kind of reflection is seeing the discourse from the global south and global north. And on the first day, I actually attended a session of panelists, different delegates from Africa, and they're discussing kind of the different gender equality progress that they've had in their countries. And like I'm like very inspired. I think some of the African countries are doing a lot better than even Canada or the United States, for example. And we have so much to learn from them. And I think we have to be we need to have better dialogue, I think, because we have so much to learn from each other. And I also think, as you know, nations in the global south continue to progress and make wonderful progress, they should look to the global north and learn from our mistakes, because we are facing a lot of crises. Whether, you know, housing affordability, for example, in Canada is a dire issue. Like, people cannot find a place to rent. Many women are resorting to shelters with their children. And so we have so much work to do. And as much as global north likes to lecture the south, I think we have so much to learn from the global south. And I think lastly, and I think this kind of goes to the point on trust, is that we have to hold each other accountable, I think, as women sometimes, because a very interesting question was brought up during a session is, you know, what do we do when there is a female figure who is either kind of perpetuating the issues that come with, you know, capitalist system or so on, and, you know, and maintaining the status quo as opposed to improving it for all of us. And I think that it's so important that in order to, you know, strengthen our institutions and strengthen financing is, you know, not to be afraid to call out our fellow sisters and say, you know, hey, I don't think this is what we need to be doing. We need to do this differently. And you know, and sometimes, you know, we have to be a bit bold. But I think that's the only way that, you know, we can build that trust, is if we're holding each other accountable.
Very feminist, I think. I have thoughts. Do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that the point that you made about empowering the woman of the household is so interesting, because, you know, when you empower the head of household, which technically could be considered the man, but I think that a lot of times it is the woman who is doing a lot of that, like you mentioned, the care work, and so that is so integral. So supporting that, giving money and resources to that, it just sort of spreads throughout the entire family and spreads outside of the household as well. So I think that's really amazing point to bring in.
Yeah, not to hark on that, but I'm just familiar with this organization called Give Directly, if anyone's heard of that. And then you probably have with financing. But they totally take on that like microfinancing model, and they, like, as their kind of organization progressed, they did those sort of studies, like what's the most effective way to just give money, and like people know what to do with it, but who do we give it to where it has the most impact? And they found that when you give it to the man more often than not, they spend it on themselves, whereas if you give it to the woman, they spend it on the family and what's good for like the entire family. And like, I just think that it's so important that, like what you said, financially empowering women is like the most ethical way of doing that, statistically.
Agree.
So yeah, Amanda, what are your thoughts on priority theme and otherwise?
Well, as a Latin American, I think the thing is like very appropriate. A few months ago, a lot of organizations from the region were united, and we talk a lot about this. And what we end up talking is that Latin America has become like a forgotten region. So we come to these events and it's amazing, it's great. The Global South has a lot of focus, but Latin America is never there. especially Central America. So we never hear about Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua. When we have countries who are living a dictatorship right now, you know, a lot of women are running from there because they're about to get murdered because they're feminists. So these kind of topics are very important for us, and we think they're like great to have a discussion, but at what point they're really having an effect when we're not involving the voices that need to be heard, for example. So we talk about democracies. That's great. Latin America is in a crisis right now, you know. We have a president in El Salvador who reelected himself, basically, has a control of all the judicial program, all the Congress program, you know, everything is under his control, and no one has said nothing, you know, and a lot of presidents congratulate him, and we're like, oh, you did amazing. We have a Nicaraguan country where people are starving. There are a lot of things wrong there. They don't have medicine, they don't have security, and people have not raised their voices around it. And we start to see a crisis with migration. United States seeing right now, especially New York. You know, we have a lot of people here, Venezuelans, Colombian, Guatemala, Nicaragua, and a lot of people here. And what exactly is how we are addressing this? We have a lot of problems. The democracies are not okay. People are not voting, not because they don't want to, it's because we lost the faith in our governments. We don't know what we can do. And us as feminist organizations, we're worried because every year we see less and less funds. I had to see last year 4 regional organizations close because they didn't have funds. They couldn't work anymore. And what happened is that when we go and we talk about funding, they are like, oh, but Latin America is okay. You don't have to worry that much. You're doing great. Your governments are perfect. And that's very easy to say when you go to the plenary session in United Nations and you hear all the governments said, we're doing okay. But if you're only believing one side, if you're not listening to the other side, it's very hard to create a change. And that's what's happening in Central America and Latin America right now. And if we talk about the Caribbean, it's even worse, for example. We can see, for example, the case of Cuba right now. They have a blockage for over decades. People are starving. They don't have access to a lot of things. Now they have to increase the salary. So we have a lot of issues going there. And who's talking about that? And it's not like in a political view, it's about a humanitarian view. Yeah. We can talk about, for example, IT. It's a country who is like completely shut down. And what's the topic of conversation around it? We have a lot of panels here in CSW, but what is the action we can do? You know, how can we fund the feminist organizations that are there because they are there? How can we secure their safety? So I think the topic is great. I think it's perfect. But I want to know how it can actually help us, you know, because we have a lot of issues. For example, the CSW is going to end. There's going to be a document, there's going to be agreements. But how, as feminist organizations, we are going to be able to access to tools, mechanisms, to funding, to try to make all of that a reality in our countries. For example, right now, Costa Rica is in a huge crisis. You know, we were a country that everyone knows because we don't have an army and that we have beautiful beaches. But the reality is that yesterday night, there was a shooting in my town, which was on the safe towns of all the country. And things like that are happening, you know. The Ministry of Transport was resigned because he was in a corruption case. And things like that have been happening. And our country is still seen like one of the good ones of Latin America when we are not. So we have a lot of issues. And we can also talk about the indigenous communities, for example, completely forgotten, completely underrepresented. I have seen a few women here, Mayan from Guatemala, but we don't see, for example, the girls from Honduras. We don't see girls from Nicaragua. We don't see girls from Panama and Costa Rica, for example. So I think the topic is great. I think it's very amplify and organize a lot of issues, but it's still like a depth for us as a region on how we can articulate. And I know we have problems articulating in the region as organizations, but there's still like a need of someone to help us like to organize. And I think United Nations needs to understand that we're not an okay region. We're not an okay country, that we need funding, that we need help. And that it's not okay, like, you know, like just to put us in a few panels and do some commitments and that's it, because we need more. You know, the global south, it's super big. Yes, we all have problems, but we cannot go on if we all have the commitment to go. So yes.
Absolutely. I think you raise a really important point about what you were saying about member states saying, we're great, we're doing fine. it really does fall on civil society to pressure the governments and to make sure they're upholding those commitments. And if there's no funding, there's no civil society. So it really, the funding is that missing piece that's so crucial.
Yeah, for example, yesterday Nicaragua was there saying everything is great. But Nicaraguan women cannot be here for two reasons. One, because there's no funding, and two, because if they speak out, they can be killed, or their family can be killed, or their house can be burned, or anything can happen. So when things like that happen, it's like, to who we pray, with who we're standing, who's protecting us as an activist. For example, we can also talk about climate change activists. I myself, I am one. And we receive threats every single day. Berta Cáceres, for example, she was murdered because she was protecting a river. We can talk also about political leaders. Marielle Franco in Brazil, she was a congressman, she was a lesbian, she was a Black woman, and she was killed because she said no to Bolsonaro. And nothing happened with them, and United Nations basically said nothing. So with who we're standing, who is also there standing with us when we are in the front line, that's what it worries us.
I also know that it's so, from my experience working with funds in America that are actively trying to fund women-led groups in Latin America, getting money into the country is so challenging because there's like a complete collapse of the financial systems, and the government ensures that even feminist funds that want to have a presence there. I know that like the really committed ones will withdraw money, thousands of dollars, travel with it informally, give it to the hands of like activists who had their homes raided and the money seized. That's not even their money, but the government is like, well, it's our money now. So it's a whole, and I completely agree with you saying the focus is always on global south, because it's so convenient for the focus to always be on all these poor countries in Southeast Asia that need emancipation, that need like these saviors from the global north to come like improve their lives. But it's so convenient to ignore your neighbors and to just like, say, and this romanticization, right, of Latin America that has always prevented people from seeing them as like real people with real human problems.
Exactly. Well, but I also think it's important to start taking that narrative that the global south is a completely mess, like Africa is bad, Asia is bad, Latin America is bad, like everything we do is bad. I think we're okay, like, everything's happening and it's not like completely okay, but we have a lot of activists and organizations doing amazing efforts. People are like I see a lot of young people preparing to change like the political scenarios of every single country of the global south. And I think we can have hope, but at the end is this: if we don't have financing, if then, that North keeps this continuing narrative that we are not good enough, that we need help, that we need guidance, it's very hard for us as the global south to research, because we keep with the pressure of continuing this narrative because we're afraid the funds can get cut, for example, or that something can happen. So it's very complicated to keep a narrative and also try to grow when this is happening all around. Yeah.
Felix, our He for She advocate. Thoughts on the priority theme and the conversation so far?
I think this theme is very timely and relevant to the situation that we are all living around the world, because it shows the interconnectedness of gender equality with broad development goals that we all aim to achieve. And it shows us how important it is to have inclusion of perspective of gender in all those different goals. And as all the fellows mentioned, I can't agree less with them. There's a lack of trust. We need more better financing mechanism. And most importantly, we need to hold our governments accountable for what they are speaking on our behalf. Because as earlier mentioned by Leila, it is not only about having women representing the voices of broader women. We need to hold them accountable that what they are talking about is really what women are demanding. The demands of women are really well represented. I attended a session on my very first day, and this exact statement was highlighted, and I couldn't agree less with her, because I thought she was even the one who made it, because it shows how powerful we need to be in terms of deciding who are leading us. And when we talk about addressing poverty in this team, it is really important to understand also how strong our institutions are, how finances are been dedicated to different parts of the institution. Because when we talk about achieving equality in terms of distribution of economies, are we thinking about education? How are we reinforcing education? Because for me and for many other people, we believe that education is one of the keys means of achieving sustainability and economic empowerment. But how many women and girls in different parts of the world can walk into classroom proudly without being harassed, without fearing how they will manage to have their next part, without fearing whether they will be mocked in school because of their menstrual period? How many girls can proudly work in classes? Because we have in our most African countries, and I believe most countries around the world, have free education. But how free is the education? Because I have always been told that education is free in my country. Public education is free, but many times we will be sent out of our classes because we didn't pay certain fees that have been made compulsory. But is education really free? Because even that amount of money that the government says is just basic, a lot of families don't afford to have it at the end of the month. How much is the does one packet of pad cost in the country? We have been advocating for tax-free sanitary pads in our country, but the discussion there is still very wide from implementation. Because when we look at other global South countries who are also doing great, we have India, for example, who has a tax-free policy on sanitary pads. If many countries around the world implement that, it will go a long way to empower women economically, because a lot of money is being spent by girls. It's not for example, it's not like reproductive health issues that can be forgotten. Menstruation cannot be forgotten. It's a natural process that needs to be taken care of. And if there's a huge demand in terms of finances to take care of that, how are we eradicating poverty among women? How are we making sure that they have the power to make decisions in their home? Because as earlier mentioned by other fellows, it is very important because when women, especially where I come from, when women face gender-based violence in her home, the question that she's been asked by her relative or family member is, if you run away, where are you going? How will you sustain yourself? It's mostly because they don't, they are restricted in terms of depending on their own economic resources. So if we empower women economically, it will go a long way for them to run away from gender-based violence, which mostly are being perpetrated in their houses. So I will go again to say, let's pressurize our government as members of civil society for them to implement the policy. Because if you see documents released after each CSW, each conference around different gender issues, we have a lot of hope, we have a lot of promises and decisions which are being made. But there's a huge gap between implementation of those decisions and the policies which are being made. In history, when we were in 10th class, we were told that after the Second War, the United Nations was seen as a toothless bulldog, because they could only make huge policies, but it is very difficult for them to enforce the implementation. We have crises around the world, but how efficient are they to implement policies that will restrict them? We are still looking forward for them to implement all those policies. And one thing that I would not like to forget is about how centralized institutions are. For example, let's see the CSW. It's a dream for me to see the CSW happening in Africa, happening in Asia, happening in different parts of the world, because of the struggle that local women, indigenous women, and young people face in order to attend the CSW here physically. It's a huge process that you have to do, and I'm sure you will agree with me that it is a privilege for a lot of people to come and see the amount of money that is spent for someone to travel to New York for the CSW. It's a yearly allowance for many local families in my country that most people can't afford. And if we go a long way to decentralize all these institutions, I believe that it will give power to women to empower themselves. Thank you.
Go ahead. Oh, thank you, Cecile. Yeah, Cecile's amazing. On that note, I know that like it's a big thing for civil society, like advocating for the CSW to be literally anywhere else that's not New York is something that's a big priority. And I know that they hinted in Summit of the Future that CSW reform is like a tiny little piece of what could come out of it. So I know that civil society was like, and I hope that that's something that you also participate in. It's like, really, like, how can you have the voices of women from all over the world if it's in one place and it's the most expensive place in the world?
Yes.
So I know that's a big point. But Amanda, I know that menstrual justice is something that's really important to you. So do you have any thoughts on what Felix was talking about with that?
Well, I think menstrual justice is a topic that it will be a central area that CSW could have, for example. I think it's time for governments to start talking about it and start creating policies, because for so many years, it has been seen as a private issue of the women, you know, like a secret, like, oh, don't tell anyone, don't say you have the period. If you're in school and you have your period, hide the pad, then no one can see it. Like, it was secret, like something like that. And I think it's important to start changing that narrative. Last year in Costa Rica, my organization had the opportunity to create a campaign so the bill of menstrual justice could be passed. So what we did basically is that took the central avenue of the capital and we put pads. And it said, let's change the rule.
Ignore it now.
So it was impossible for people to be like, oh no, because it was everywhere. You know, there were pads and the word menstruation everywhere. So people had to look at it and start to realize it was a problem. As I said, Costa Rica has this like mindset that we're an okay country. But it's not true. In Costa Rica, 1 in 4 girls skip school because they don't have access to products. For example, we have a lot of girls missing school. We had a lot of schools, especially in rural areas, that do not have bathrooms. So we started to work around it. And one of the findings we had is that there was not also like the problem of structure and access to these products, but also a lot of misinformation, and not only from governments, but also from the people. So when we start giving workshops in the rural area, in the coast, I remember that we were having like this workshop with a game, and the girls will tell us something that they believe it was true. And one of the girls said that she doesn't go to the ocean when she's on her period because she's afraid a shark is going to bite her. And everyone laughed, but it was because everyone thought it was true. So they were like, yeah, we don't do that. So, you know, how do you start to change that conversation when they cannot have access to things like that? So we start to push that. The government was very nice about it. They kind of supported us. The Congress was all in for about it. The bill passed unanimously. Everyone voted in favor, and it was great. But now we have a huge work on, you know, now we need to start applying the bill. And that includes giving all the products that people need in schools, in jails, and in migration centers. We need the hospitals to start giving the products to people who are in poverty. We need the Ministry of Education to create educational programs around it. And finally, we need the health institution to create campaigns around it so we fight the stereotypes. So it's very simple, you hear it like that, but it's very hard. You know, it's like, oh yeah, 4 things, but no, they're very hard to do. But I think if every single country could commit for at least one of those 4, we will do a huge impact in the lives of millions of girls. Because at the end, when a girl skips school, she will skip then college, and they will skip work, and she will not be able to do her life, and she will be in a cycle of violence. So if we keep out this menstrual justice stereotype of afraidness, we can provide this girl an opportunity to build her life. Yes.
Well, we are approaching the end. We have about 15 minutes, and I want to open it up to our virtual audience. If you have a question for DT, Lila, Amanda, Helix, or any and all of the fellows, now is your chance. If you want to raise your hand virtually, or if you plug it in the chat, I'll also read it aloud to our amazing fellows. So, it looks like Sylvia, go ahead, you can unmute and ask our question, but keep it short because we're running out of time, unfortunately.
Yes, hello everybody. I'm I was listening to your examples and frameworks, and it sounds like you are talking about all the experiences that encompasses discrimination on the basis of sex. And I think that's the axis of by which most societies and countries are organized in terms of discrimination. And I was wondering whether you would in some ways make it explicit from the start or in your document or your conversation that is the framework of analysis, because again, when you're talking about menstrual justice, for example, or postnatal care, postpartum care, I think that you're discussing discrimination on the basis of sex rather than gender identity, which I think is an important other category of analysis, but really encompasses a different set of experiences. And it sounds like, importantly, you're dealing with the 50% of the population that is discriminated on the basis of sex. So I think it's important to always use discrimination on the basis of sex as opposed to gender justice or gender discrimination, because otherwise you mix one category with the other.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for our fellows in the audience? I see WRHP Nigeria. I don't know your name, but if you have a question for our fellows, go ahead.
Okay, so thank you very much. My name is Ayomide, and WRAHP is an acronym for Women's Rights and Health Project Nigeria. Yeah, so thank you. A lot has been said by this panel, and I really enjoyed this section. So what I would just like to chip in is that we have policies, but do our policies, do they really matter to us ourselves? Have we been able to bring these policies even to our organization workplace? I remembered one of the panelists here saying that our organization organized a section for schoolgirls last year on menstrual hygiene. But are we bringing this into our workplaces? Do our organizations are they women friendly? Do we have the crèche for children? Do we have menstrual products in our restrooms? Are we bringing these things out into our workplace before, selling it out to the public? So, and we engaging men is critical, just like the last person said. Engaging men is critical in this. We need to see them as allies and not opponents. So we need to be intentional in our interventions and design. So this is my comment and contribution to this panel section. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think we have time for one question. If Jasper Women's Health Organization, if you have a question for one or all of our fellows.
It's not necessarily a question. It's just a suggestion, I believe. I kind of missed the name of the last speaker, but I just wanted to build upon the point they raised. So I know she did mention the availability of menstrual products in prisons, schools, and among vulnerable communities. But what I think is that making these products available doesn't necessarily have to be centered around vulnerable communities, because this is a biological situation. It happens to almost every woman. And I believe, I hope to censor this sentence I'm about to say. I believe that everybody visits the washroom to probably do number 2 when they need to. And they don't carry toilet rolls around because they know they're going to go into the toilet and going to meet one there. That is how women should visit the toilet. They need to visit the toilet and know they are going to have sanitary pads available. You don't necessarily have to be in a situation where you can't afford it or you are in a place where it's not available. You should have the confidence of walking in every public restroom, knowing that if you've had an accident or if things have happened the way that you've not planned it, you still have something to rely on. You still know that there is availability of the products you need to be able to live a dignified life, no matter where you are, no matter if you can afford it or not. We need to change the narrative of making it all depend on vulnerable communities, making the conversation all around vulnerable communities. It's women in general. We need to make sure that we are putting in place policies and steps in making sure that women live a dignified life, not only vulnerable women in general, and it ends there. Menstrual products should be considered a necessity, not a luxury that we are trying to bring vulnerable communities into having. But it should be something we consider as a necessity, just like we consider toilet rolls. That is my take on that. Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like we have one question, and then I think we'll have to stop with that. This is from Anuli Anibo. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. My question is, do you find that there is progress with work CSW is doing across the board? What do you think can be changed, if at all? Open to any of you on. Very broad.
Maybe I can start, but also take a second to answer to just for women's health. I think it's important to understand that we need to start somewhere, you know, like I completely agree with you. Everything will be completely free. We should have everything on the bathroom. But there's also a conversation that we need to have with, for example, public institution or private enterprise, that they need to add this on budget. So we need to start creating budget with gender focus, for example. So there's still a progress to do. But for example, we can always look out to Scotland, who was the first country to have this menstrual justice like general mechanism. And they have products free for anyone who has them in any public institution. So I think we need to start somewhere. I completely agree. Everything should be free, but we need to do baby steps. You know, to conquer the world, we need to go a little bit slow. But yes. And about the question, I think the CSW has done a lot of work. It's very important to recognize that. The resolutions they have doing is very important. For example, last year they released a very important statement about women and climate justice. But I think there's still a work to do on how we could involve like NGOs and activists in a more way to be like, to ask accountability to states. So that way it will be easier somehow for the next CSW to come and be with like a checklist and be like, okay, you were supposed to do this, this, and this. So besides you giving this speech in the assembly, tell me what happened with this exactly. So something like that, I think it will be very important to have.
Maybe I'll chime in briefly.
Yeah,
I think that there's definitely been progress across time, but I think something that was brought up a lot to this particular CSW is the lack of funding and funding shortages. And I guess as a question for all of you, how much do you think every day, like in one day, is put towards military expenditure worldwide?
Oh my God, it's gotta be like $1 billion.
It's 5 billion. 5 billion every day to military expenditure worldwide. And so we have to challenge our systems, you know, to think like, is this really the best use of our money? And I think when we see more women in power, and it's been shown that women are, you know, more peaceful or like less, you know, war or military inclined, that hopefully those funds are diverted towards places where we really need it.
Yes, absolutely. Great point.
I also feel like it's great that, you know, we have the NGO CSW, where like-minded people that don't all necessarily work for only NGOs or only donors or with the government have this platform to also interact with each other. But I still feel like these are two parallels, you know, what happens at the HQ and what the rest of us are doing outside of it. And I feel like if there were more opportunities for even one day of the week or of the 2 weeks where we could all meet together and not just, you know how we have the caucus where we're discussing the outcomes, where it could be the other way around, where they're looking at the NGO CSW outcomes, where those outcomes are discussed in the General Assembly with the country governments, where these voices, these very small, maybe very small opinions are heard on a much larger scale. And I mean, that also I think answers what, you know, she was, Jasper Women's Health was saying. Of course, you know, in a perfect world, everybody should have access to all of these things, but the sad reality is we're not operating in a perfect world. And so we are, I feel, the designated people to speak for the vulnerable communities that don't have this platform. And maybe 5 years ago, we wouldn't have had this platform if we didn't have access to education, if somebody didn't think of us as that group that needed you know, extra care, or we weren't privileged enough to have access to education in, you know, the parts of the world that we come from.
Yeah, and I think the question is really great because it helps us to see whether we are going on the right way or not. And I would like to agree with you all that CSW has done a lot of progress, and there's still much on the way that's being done and to be done. First of all, like integration of young people in official delegations, and to making sure that we are having the youth forum starting from tomorrow. But one question is that, is it official? Is it part of the official session? We should push for to make sure that the youth forum should not only be happening, but they should be taken as part of the official part of the negotiations. And also one observation that I've seen here, my first year is that whenever I go to one of the negotiation rooms, a lot of seats are empty, and most of these seats are from countries which are facing the huge impact on climate, on gender inequalities. How is CSW making sure that the countries are not only being given the opportunity to come and represent themselves, but they are really representing themselves? Because each country, yesterday, the day before yesterday, there was a session where countries were reporting on what they have done so far. And so far, the speeches were all amazing. We just saw amazing work that have been done. But at a certain point of time, we are hearing complaints from different parts of the world. But none of that is being reported. We are only seeing how progress is going, and from where are we getting all those complaints? So that is just a question that I would like to end with.
That's a great one. I know that we are like 2 minutes left, so I'm gonna ask our fellows to do one thing, if they're comfortable with it. I'd like them all to just say how old they are. Again, if it like ageism, you can say no, but if we can just finish going on a circle, unless we just broke out. Oh, okay, we're back. Aditi, if you want to start, if you're
I'm
comfortable.
happy to. As the oldest person in the room, I think I'm one of the 5 fellows that are in their 30s. I'm 32.
32.
I'm 25.
I'm 27.
I think I'm the youngest here, I'm 20.
Wow. And I only say that because one of our fellows brought up on Sunday, Marina, who I encourage our group to meet all of our fellows, but said that like one of the biggest problems facing youth activists is that we are infantilized and not taken seriously. But I'm having them end on this because listen to how brilliant all of them were and how young they are and how much they bring to the table. And that's like the beauty of the Global Youth Fellows, I think, is you're all just brilliant and youth. And so we're very privileged to have them here to talk to us today. And I guess we'll have them all sign off. Thank you all for listening to our first conversation. Thank you to our fellows. I'm not going to clap because but yeah, okay. Thank you again to our fellows, and thank you for everyone for tuning in. Feel free to unmute and say goodbye. It's kind of an NGO CSW New York.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
Wonderful.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Madam, goodbye বলেন।